Hi, everybody. My name is Greg Katz, and welcome to Tuesday's edition of WeAreSC.com's Inside the Trojans Huddle. Friends, Inside the Trojans Huddle, where we tell it like it is a game-like panel discussion that is posted Tuesdays in the off-season and twice during the regular season. The huddle features WeAreSC columnists, staff writers, and historians. We first start off with the pregame show, where we introduce our panel members for this edition of Inside the Trojans Huddle, and then give you the latest USC Trojans football news. Now let's meet Tuesday's panelists. A WeAreSC columnist who writes WeAreSC.com's The Monday Morass, Yay or Nay, and Sunday Takeaways, in addition to regular season football and basketball reports. He also hosts his own podcast show entitled Locked On USC, Marc Kulkin. The editor-in-chief of WeAreSC.com, columnist, national recruiting guru, and a graduate of USC, Erik McKinney, and a former William Jewell College defensive back and WeAreSC columnist who writes the popular WeAreSC.com's Musings with Arledge, and now has his own weekly WeAreSC.com video show, Musings with Arledge, and he's a graduate of the USC Law School, Chris Arledge. And a weekly WeAreSC columnist who writes Fridays, The Obvious and Not So Obvious, IMHO Sunday, and is an active member of the Football Writers Association of America, your moderator and producer of Inside the Trojans Huddle, Greg Katz. Before we kick off this Tuesday's edition of Inside the Trojans Huddle, here is the latest USC football news. First, congratulations to former USC Trojans, Juju Smith-Schuster and Ronald Jones, who will be getting a Super Bowl ring after their Kansas City Chiefs defeated the Philadelphia Eagles 38-35 in Super Bowl 57 on Sunday in Arizona. And USC officially announced the dates for its Trojan Family Weekend. Circle the dates of October 5th through the 8th, which centers around the Trojans' home game on October 6th against the Arizona Wildcats in the Coliseum. And as a reminder for those of you that are kind of behind the recruiting times, the Trojans did add to their 2023 recruiting class last week when Tyler Robles from La Costa Canyon, California, selected Trojans over Boston College. And get this, Georgia Southern University, that's with Clay Helton. And a reminder, the third Trojans, preferred walk-on joins running backs King Miller and defensive lineman Kalen Miller. They are twins from local Calabasas High School. And 5 former Trojans have been invited to the upcoming NFL Combine in Indianapolis beginning February 26th. Those 5 Trojans would be wide receiver Jordan Addison, corner Makai Blackman, running back Travis Dye, defensive tackle Tuli Pelotu, and offensive guard Andrew Voorhees. Friends, WeAreSC.com's Inside the Trojans Huddle greatly appreciates your viewer and listenership. We encourage those of you watching on sites like YouTube, click on the red subscriber and like buttons. It's greatly valued, and it is free. And a reminder, WeAreSC.com is offering a subscription special. You can get all the WeAreSC.com premium content for just $29.95 up to August 31st, 2023, or $9.99 per month. With the bell, we kick off the first half of Inside the Trojans Huddle. Panel. First, a quick reaction to former Trojans Juju Smith-Schuster and Ronald Jones winning the Super Bowl. And I got to ask you this: what did you think of that Eagles pass interference call to Juju Smith-Schuster late in the game? Did you find it a good call, bad call, or just let it go? Marc Kulkin, why don't you lead us off with your opinion? If you watched the game, what do you think? Was it a pass interference?
It was a Pac-12 call. It was a great route by Juju. Gotta love that spin route, but ball wasn't even catchable. And to call a holding, look, you can call holding on any play, on any snap in the game of football. To make that call at that juncture of the game, really iffy. I don't know. It was I mean, by the rule, it was a penalty. It was just, I don't think it had any play on the play itself. So other than that, fun game to watch, exciting. Rojo got his second ring, Juju gets one. And on that, it was just a fun game to watch. I didn't have a rooting interest in the teams. I was there to watch for an exciting game. The quarterbacks, though, man, whoo, a lot of fun to watch. Kind of reminds you of a guy USC has.
Erik, what'd you think?
Yeah, I mean that right. If that penalty gets called, Colts Texans week 4, nobody bats an eye. And the problem is they hadn't been calling that, right? No real holding penalties all game on the offensive lines. The egregious, when the defense is jumping way offside, that they called that. And I thought they got both of the review catches on the sideline right. The one incomplete and the one complete. I thought they'd done a really good job up until that point. That is just a bad call in that situation. Now going back to Juju winning, Ronald Jones winning Super Bowl, that gives USC 50 Super Bowl winners all time, which is the most of any college. And it feels like it's been a while since a USC, like a USC star was the star in a Super Bowl and won one. But you're talking wide receivers now, Juju, Robert Woods, Nelson Aguilar, like those are all very recent Super Bowl winners. So USC kind of continuing to add on to those numbers when you talk about sort of success in college and success in the NFL. So no, big time congratulations for them. And Juju, it was fun to watch him after the game, everything he did celebrating, going up into the stands, shouting questions at the press conference to teammates there. You can tell that guys just like him, like having him on the team.
You're a former.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Mark.
We'll put his wardrobe aside though, that he wore to the game.
That was a little bit questionable.
Got to stand out.
Well, it stood out. Let's put it that way. Chris, you're a former defensive back. Was it pass interference or not?
Well, look, when you pull the jersey and the jersey comes away from the receiver's body, that's something that gets called all the time. I don't think it impacted the play, but it's hard to say when you see the jersey get pulled away from the body that you can't call holding. It's going to get called all the time. I didn't really care who was going to win the game. I am happy for Rojo and Juju. Juju especially, because Juju is friends with my cousin's son, and I don't know if I've mentioned this on the show before. My first experience with Juju Smith-Schuster was when he was in Junior All-American, and I went out to watch my cousin invites me to watch their son play. And the first play I come out there, they run a toss sweep to some kid who stiff arms 2 kids, almost killed him, I think, the way he stiff armed them, turns the corner and takes off like a shot down the sideline. All these little kids with angles, and the angles didn't matter because he was about 6 times faster than anybody on the field. And I said, "What was that?" And my cousin said, "Oh, that's Juju. He always does that." He does, in fact, always do that. Now he's got a ring on his finger. He was very nice to my son when we met him a number of years ago after the Notre Dame game. So I'm thrilled to death it happened. And I suspect that Juju doesn't feel sorry for the Eagles at all over that holding call. So I won't worry about it either.
Well, I'll tell you what, I was rooting for Kansas City only because there were 2 Trojans on Kansas City, and there was one theoretically with Philadelphia. I thought actually 2 things that came to my mind on it was, number one, the defensive back said afterwards that he did hold. So if he's willing to say it publicly that it was holding on his part, it was fine. And the second thing is, if you're going to have rules, you enforce them. If you don't want to have the rules like that, then don't have the rule. I know one thing, the referee that called it will always be remembered, that he isn't afraid to make a big call in a big game, and there's nothing bigger than that. But all in all, I thought it was, also one other thing that came from it, I kept waiting to ask someone to ask Juju if he was going to just be a one and done at Kansas City. And they kind of prodded him on the NFL Network. And he said, "No, I want to come back," because there was a thought that Juju wanted to get back to LA and play for the Rams specifically. He did say let's keep doing this with Mahomes and so on and so forth. I don't know. I'll take it at face value. He wants to stay, but it wouldn't shock me that when it comes down to numbers and all this stuff and coming home and he's got his foundation here, that he doesn't have a second thought on that comment. Now, let's transition, guys. Thank you for those comments. Panel, we're just weeks away from the opening of spring ball, which begins on Saturday, March 4th. And we thought we'd start to get into it a little bit, and then we'll get into it heavier next week. Let's begin to look at spring ball by naming 5 players on offense that you are interested in and following their development and why. Mark, who are your 5 players that you're interested in on offense that you want to follow?
Yeah, Caleb Williams, just because I want to see if he's ready to take that next step. And it's hard to say that next step going from great to awesome, but he's kind of laid it out there. He's setting up some personal goals. I know some of it was, tongue in cheek, maybe it wasn't, but I want to see how he handles that pressure, because there's going to be a lot of pressure on him this coming season, especially knowing that he's got a defense that that we're not sure of. I won't put words in his mouth. The other player, Rayleigh Brown, is he going to be that guy? He had a chance to show what he could do as a freshman. Now you take that leap to your sophomore season, put on the weight, get stronger, smarter. Let's see if he's the guy to be, that everybody wanted in the country. Zachariah Branch, obviously, if he's everything that Chris says he is, boy, we got Reggie Bush 2.0. And then I want to see Lake McCree. I want to see the tight end. You were able to pull one in the recruiting. Let's see Lake McCree become a big part of the offense. We know he's really athletic. I loved what I saw from him last year. I just want to see more of it. And then the other guy on offense, and there's so many players to choose from, but Marshawn Lloyd. I want to see if that's going to be the running back this year. And if he is, there's going to be some dominoes that fall in that room. So we'll see what happens.
All right, Eric, who's your Fab 5?
So I went with just 5 returners. I didn't go with any newcomers or transfers. Raleek and Lake McCree actually on my list. I thought Raleek, he had that game against Rice where he scored and then had that long run and then got hurt. And you just wonder, when you're a true freshman and you're trying to kind of make your way and make an impact, when you get hurt that early, how does that affect sort of development? And I thought against Tulane, we really saw how he can get used. He caught a bunch of passes, was targeted a ton, given some handoffs, was kind of all over the field. And so where does that go next? Because one of Mark's other guys, Zachariah Branch, is coming and he's not waiting for anybody. He wants to get on the field right now. Marshawn Lloyd, another guy at running back. So it's going to get crowded quickly at those skill positions. I'd like to see how Raleek gets used. Another guy for me, Jonah Monheim on the offensive line. Potentially a switch, and we talk about Michael Tarquin coming over from Florida. That's a guy who's played right tackle pretty much exclusively. Jonah Monheim played right tackle and right guard. I think the thought from all of us is he probably slides in and plays right guard. What does that look like? He'd still be playing next to Justin Dedich, but at different positions sort of for both of them, although you moved a ton of guys around a lot in 2022. But is he Andrew Voorhees, right? Is he an All-American and potentially the best interior lineman in the Pac-12? Needs a big step forward, and Caleb Williams needs every bit of great offensive line play this year. So interested to see him. And then I threw a couple of wide receivers on there, a couple of returners, and that's Taj Washington and Brendan Rice. Does USC get Cotton Bowl Brendan Rice for an entire season? There were ups and downs. He made some great plays. You lose Jordan Addison, and I think the thought is, maybe Dorian Singer comes in and does that. If Brendan Rice gives you 12, 13, 14, 15 games of Cotton Bowl Brendan Rice, that is a big time addition and probably your number one receiver there. So interested to see what he does. And then Taj Washington, there's so much talk about sort of Mario Williams and what he might do. And yes, he was great for stretches, but Taj Washington, he did so much in that offense. He lined up in the backfield, he played slot, he blocked, he did all of that kind of stuff. I think that next level for him, just in terms of the offense, maybe not if you just look at receptions and receiving yards and touchdowns, but how he functions and how vital he is to the offense. Interested to see kind of where he goes this spring too.
Okay, Chris, you're 5.
So I'm going to talk about Zachariah Branch because he's my favorite guy to talk about. Look, Taj Washington and Mario Williams are very good football players. Both of them have experience. They've made plays. And both of them are hearing footsteps right now because Zachariah Branch is more talented than they are. And that's not a knock on those guys. Those guys are quick and they're fast and they can make plays. But Zachariah Branch is different. And I think it's going to be very difficult to keep him off the field. Wide receiver is a position where guys can play early. We've seen a lot of USC guys through the years come in as freshmen and play very, very well. I will be stunned if Zachariah Branch isn't one of the go-to guys on that offense by midseason. I just think he's that talented. He has, Lincoln Riley had talked about it in his press conference. This is a guy who, in terms of change of direction and speed and ball skills, he has everything. He's extraordinary. So I'm looking forward to seeing that. I also have Rayleigh Brown on my list. He's a talented kid who last year did not understand how to play running back at the college level. You got to get first downs when there's a first down to be gotten. You've got to get upfield instead of going north-south because he's no longer so fast he can just outrun everybody. I think he'll figure those things out, but he needs to if he's going to be a weapon. Because last year he was a guy that had talent, but you couldn't rely on him. You couldn't rely on him because it could be 3rd and 1 and he has a 3-yard gain and he'll take a 2-yard loss instead. And you just can't do that. It doesn't work. So I think he's going to take a big step forward. I hope he is. I'm interested to see what Malachi Nelson brings to the table. Not because, I hope he doesn't play this year. If he plays this year, then I'm going to be very disappointed. We all will be. But I'd like to see what he has. And is this the next big thing at quarterback for USC? And a couple of linemen, Mason Murphy and Cortland Ford. Mason Murphy's a guy that the coaches clearly love his ability and his ceiling. I want to see whether he takes that next step. And Cortland Ford is now finding himself in a very crowded offensive line room. And this is a guy who sees himself as an NFL left tackle. Well, if that's what he is, then he's going to have to take a major step. He's probably going to have to be a little bit quicker than he was last year. And he's going to have to beat out some pretty good dudes if he's going to take over that spot. So I'm curious to see what those guys do this spring.
Well, assuming that the players I name are going to participate in spring ball, my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, that Malachi Nelson will not participate in the way we probably would like to have seen him participate because he's recovering from shoulder surgery. So we'll see how that one goes. Be great to see him on the field, no doubt about that. One of the other players I wanted to list in my top 5 was Ethan White, the committed, should we say, transfer offensive lineman from Florida, who I understand is kind of waiting for an opening spot on the roster. Maybe somebody has to transfer or just say, I've had enough. Otherwise, he'd be in my top 5. But to my knowledge, these are my 5 that I expect will be in spring ball. And correct me if I'm wrong. One is Marshawn Lloyd. If he's at spring ball, which I haven't heard that he isn't going to be, I think that he's really going to contend for the starting position, and we'll see how he develops. And then you start saying, as Chris said, and I agree with him, by the way, the development of the young freshman running back, and we'll see how he does when he sees a player like Marshawn Lloyd, who I think is really outstanding. In fact, I guess the guy that he's really going to compete against, honestly, is going to be Austin there. And I think that he's going to have quite a battle with Austin Jones. I also want to see Dorian Singer. I want to see how he connects with Caleb Williams. I think that Dorian Singer, if he's going to be the lead guy, he's going to show it throughout spring ball. We'll see how that develops. I also agree with Zachariah Branch. Although, as great as I think Zachariah Branch could be, and no matter how good he looks in the spring, he's still got to prove it in front of 70,000 people in the Coliseum. Now, I did not see every single play that Zachariah Branch had at Bishop Gorman, but there was some question raised about consistency in catching the ball. Although I saw him in the Polynesian game, he looked great. Obviously, if he's got the ball in his hands, he's going to go. If you don't, I mean, you could have 3 guys on him and he's going to find a crack and try to take it all the way. The other one I want to see is Jarrett Kingsley from Washington State, because this is going to have an effect on what happens with Cortland Ford. If Jarrett Kingsley is the left tackle, that would be a good thing or a good problem to have. And number 5, I'm going to go with wide receiver Brendan Rice myself. And I think Erik made a good point of it. Are we going to see the Cotton Bowl Brendan Rice? I still get the impression that I'm not always 100% sure when I see the ball going toward him, whether he's covered or he's not covered, whether he's going to catch the ball. But we'll hope that the Cotton Bowl was a big step, but I'd like to see his development in practice and see how it goes. All right, panel, let's flip the line of scrimmage and name me 5 players on defense you're interested in following their development and why. So, Mark, who are the 5 guys on defense you want to follow here in spring?
I'm just going to start off with a couple of guys who've been around. Corey Foreman. I look, make or break year. He has got to take that position in the spring. Otherwise, I don't think it's ever going to be his position. I know he's working really hard. He's humbled himself. He's doing what he can. We'll see if he's the right fit for that job, for that spot. Damani Jackson. Scott mentioned the other day on WeAreSC that he was primed to be the starting cornerback last season before he had an injury setback. So if that's the case and he's helping now, man, USC's going to have an intriguing prospect there, because you don't get those types of 6'2", 200-pound, fly like the wind type of cornerbacks. Those don't come around very often, and he's a physical guy. So really interested to watch him develop at corner. Zion Branch, is he going to be the strong safety? That we know USC has tackling issues. If he can just show up and tackle, the competition there is going to be fun to watch. And then the other guys I had were Mason Cobb and Kion Bars. Cobb, USC needs tacklers. He had less than 100, or last year just under 100 at Oklahoma State. Let's see him get 101 at USC this year. And then Kion Bars, look, you need somebody in that middle. It's been a problem spot. And if these guys aren't the solution, then it's got to be the scheme. They've upgraded. I don't think there's any question about it.
Erik, who's your 5?
Yeah, so I went with just returners again for this one. Zion Branch is on my 5. I think the USC safety position just it sort of fell apart as the year went along. I think you like what you have in Kalen Bullock. He is one of the best cover safeties in the country. Tackling has been an issue. You need someone who can clean up. He needs to kind of get more consistent there, more physical. He's a guy that kind of owns when he makes mistakes and has talked about that as well. I expect big things from him, but that other spot sort of rotated a little bit. Max Williams started there. Bryson Shaw sort of filled in. I think Zion is a big time tackler and extremely smart. Will understand where to be and all of that. I think that he's a guy who would have seen the field as a true freshman. Not saying he would have started, but I think he would have helped out had he not suffered that injury right at the very beginning of summer workouts. Romello Height for me. Mark went with Corey Foreman at that rush end spot. I'm going to go with Romello. It was Romello's position. He came in last spring, took it over. He was going to be the starter, had that sort of arm shoulder setback in the fall. And I don't think USC fans ever really got a chance to see what he could do. He was injured going into the season, got ejected for targeting that first half against Rice, and then got hurt against Stanford, was out for the year just like that. It felt like a handful of plays. So again, want to see if he can sort of pick up where he left off when he got hurt last year and maybe get at that rush end spot. And that's a position that USC seems to have upgraded at too. So there's going to be a fight there for him. Right in the middle, Eric Gentry. I'm curious what his body looks like after a year at USC. This will be his third year in college, how he develops and how USC uses him. Is he still that middle linebacker? I know the USC coaches love to use him kind of in the passing lanes to kind of be a problem for quarterbacks, which he is. Caleb Williams talks about that a bunch, that he's a problem to throw against in practices. But as is going to be the case, I think, until we actually see them in a game, the question is going to be tackling. What happens there with him and really that entire position. Devin Tompkins, for me, he's a guy on that defensive line where I remember seeing him the first day at practice, and it was like, there's something there, right? He's a guy who did not play a ton of football. He's a basketball player, a big time athlete, and you see the body, just kind of the lower half and how he is growing and maturing and the way he moves. And there's a lot to like when you look at him. And so how does the football come for him, and can he be a big addition to that defensive line? Again, another position where there's a lot of guys coming in as transfers that you think, if you're going to make a move, you better start making a move right now. And then the fifth guy that I have is Jacoby Covington. Mark mentioned Damani at corner. Jacoby Covington, I thought it was pretty interesting last year when Alex Grinch, he was pretty upfront. Hey, we expected more from this guy, paraphrasing. They thought he'd come in and make a real impact at corner. And it took a bit. He eventually did grab a starting corner spot. I think kind of the offseason and how he grows into that and takes advantage, because everybody saw what Mekhi Blackman did to the room last year, coming in as a transfer and saying, this is my job and I'm going to be a leader here. People can kind of shoot for that. I think Covington is a guy to watch there at corner this spring, because they need guys to step up there as well. I mean, you can say that about every spot on defense, but yeah, those are my five.
Chris, who's your quintet?
I'm going to start with Damani Jackson also, for the reasons talked about. It's rare to find a guy with those physical attributes, with the height, the long arms, a 10-200 guy. I mean, and good hips. You're not going to find a more talented corner anywhere. I'm not sure you're going to find a more talented cornerback in the NFL. I mean, his skills are off the charts, and USC badly needs somebody who can step in and be a shutdown corner. So I want to see whether he can do that. Tyrone Taleni, this is a guy who I don't think anybody expected anything from last year. Hadn't played much football, didn't do anything at K-State. I think K-State was happy to buy him a bus ticket and get him out of the program. I don't think anybody thought he had anything. And he actually, as the year went on, started to perform pretty well. And this is a guy who I think can make a big jump because of how little football he's played. I think if he gets a little bigger, a little stronger, he can work on his technique, because I don't think he had a ton of that. This is a guy who really might make a difference at a position of need. So I'm excited to see it. I'm with Eric on Romello Height. This is the guy that was supposed to provide a pass rush, and he got hurt. And once he got hurt, their only option for a pass rush was to take big defensive tackles and stick them out there, which is not good. So I'm hopeful we'll see something from him. Garrison Madden, a guy with, unbelievable speed for a linebacker. I mean, this is a guy who runs like a corner. Is he going to be big enough? Is he physical enough? Is he good enough? I don't know, but it's intriguing when you have a guy who's that fast to see what he can do. And my fifth one is Kalen Bullock, who is a great player who needs to be greater. This is a guy who has unbelievable range, but he played safety too often as if he were Deion Sanders, that the only thing that matters is how he's going to cover people, and he's not really that interested in tackling people. And maybe that's unfair. Maybe Kalen, if he hears this, which he probably doesn't, would say, that's not right. But I got to say, I saw a lot of opportunities for our secondary to come up and smack somebody and put them on the ground, and they didn't do it. He needs to get better at that. And I think he can. He's a good athlete, and he's shown on occasion he'll come up and hit somebody. But if you're going to play back there, you cannot afford to miss tackles. So I want to see him really improve in that area. And if he does, he has a chance to go down as one of the great USC safeties. And that's saying something at this program. If he doesn't become a consistent tackler, then he's not going to come close to that, because I don't care if it's Mark Carrier or Ronnie Lott or Troy Polamalu or Tim McDonald. There are a whole lot of great safeties that have played at USC, and every single one of them, they would put a guy on his back. Caleb Bullock needs to start putting people on their back.
Well, I think all these players that you guys have mentioned certainly are worthy of following development. I can certainly see why you would put them on your list. For me, I'm going to start off with Mason Cobb. You know, I kind of have an idea of what the returners are going to do or what they've done. I don't have an idea how much they're going to develop. That will remain to be seen. And if the media doesn't get a chance to watch spring practice at length, we will still be in the dark about how these guys develop. But for the sake of the argument here, my number one is Mason Cobb. I want to see how he competes for the inside linebacker position, if he's competing. I think the wild card is Eric Gentry. I'm not so sure he shouldn't be on the outside, depending on how, as Eric, I think, mentioned, his height and his weight, especially his weight, goes there. I want to see number two for me, Tackett Curtis. I think that this guy is mature beyond his years, not only big, fast, strong, but very, very smart. Third, the 3, 4, and 5 are all defensive linemen. I think it all starts there. I don't think that's football 101 confusion. I want to see Anthony Lucas, see how he incorporates his obviously great potential. Potential is sometimes referred to as unproven talent. If he can live up to it, that's going to be a big, big deal. Jack Sullivan, the transfer from Purdue, I can see him easily starting. And a lot of people I've talked to really believe he was underrated at Purdue, that he really is a really tough player, plays every down. And of course, Kyron Barnes that Mark mentioned, this is a guy that was doing pretty well in his progression until he got hurt. And I think if you had Lucas, Sullivan, and Barnes as your down three, I think that would be a pretty big improvement. Now, granted, Tui Pelotu isn't going to be here, but if Lucas lives up to his potential, probably could ease the pain on that one. Now, staying on offense a little bit, panel, name the one player that needs to up his game during spring ball. Mark, is there one that comes to mind? Say, this guy just got to get better.
Get better or up his game?
Take it whatever way you want.
Yeah. You know, I don't know. Was it you, Eric, who mentioned Cortland Ford getting squeezed maybe?
Chris.
But
Don't say Cortland Ford, because I'm gonna say Cortland Ford.
Okay, I'm not going to say Cortland
No,
Ford.
Go ahead.
We're probably going to say for different reasons. I'm going to say Cortland Ford only because what Chris was addressing earlier. You know, is he a left tackle, and is he USC's starting left tackle? And if he isn't, is he willing to accept a different position, or is he going to say, I'm a left tackle and I'm going to prove it somewhere else? So that's my angle on this, where he needs to step it up, because USC brought in 3 former starters from programs that didn't come here to play a backup role. 2 of them were tackles.
Okay, Eric, who's the one player you're honing in on, or we are no longer surprised?
No, talking about from the player's perspective, yeah, it's Cortland Ford, right? Like Jarrett Kingston comes in from Washington State. That's a guy who was honorable mention all Pac-12 and missed a big chunk of the season. Like he is a known entity in this conference that has played a ton of left tackle. This is more of if I'm Cortland Ford, this is more of a warning lights going off than when USC got Bobby Haskins. Bobby Haskins for me came with more kind of questions and maybe red flags than Kingston does coming down from Washington State. So that's why I was going to go with Cortland Ford. I think for USC, maybe it's Austin Jones too, for some of those same reasons. We talked a bunch of guys sort of brought up Marshawn Lloyd, and then Raleek Brown is not going to be benched. I think you're going to find a spot for him somewhere, if it's in the slot or receiver or running back, what have you. But Austin Jones did so well at the end of the year, filling in for Travis Dye, and all of a sudden Marshawn Lloyd shows up, and it's like your path to starting at the beginning of the year is still not clear. And so if he can sort of step his game up, both kind of from his perspective of actually being on the field and playing a bunch, and then from I think USC's perspective too, I think the running backs did a good job last year. The pass protection and that kind of thing, outside of some of the big time highlights from Travis Dye, I think left something to be desired. And then I think for Austin too, some long runs, right? The speed and ability to break more tackles and that kind of stuff. Just when you're talking about sort of upping your game from year to year, I think those are places where he can improve. You're starting with a really good product, but I mean, ultimately, if you're talking about who needs to get better, it's everybody. I mean, it's everybody on the roster during spring. But I think those two for me sort of jump out when you're talking about maybe some big time position battles, saving yourself from getting sort of pushed down the depth chart a little bit, and then how they can help the offense overall.
Chris, who sticks out to you that needs to up their game on offense?
Well, I was going to say Cortland Ford, but I can't be the third straight guy to do that. So let me go with I'm going to go with two, because I think they're both in the same position: Taj Washington and Mario Williams. Taj played surprisingly well last year. At least it surprised me. I didn't think he had that in him. I think he probably needs to work on his consistency in terms of his hands. But this is a guy who was making catches. He was blocking, especially for a small guy, a heck of a blocker out there. Mario Williams, a guy that has a real connection with Caleb Williams. He came over with Lincoln Riley. I think that this is a guy who expected to be, a first team all conference and competing for All-American status type guy. And he has ability to do that. But I think with Taj Washington raising his game and with Zachariah Branch on the way, I think Mario Williams needs to step up, or he could become the forgotten guy there. A guy that gets, 2, 3, 4 targets a game instead of 8, 10, 12. So I think he's going to have to play really well, and he probably will. But so I'm going to go with him.
Well, you know what, Chris? We agree on this. Specifically, Mario Williams. I think Mario Williams, for whatever reason, I thought he was inconsistent in catching the ball. Sometimes he was wide open. He dropped it. I don't know whether you can improve that per se in spring ball, because you don't have national TV cameras there, and you're under the microscope. But I think maybe he felt a little bit second fiddle there to Jordan Addison, and he was almost kind of like a forgotten guy. And then he had that unfortunate kickoff return miscue, which has nothing to do with him being a wide receiver, by the way. But I thought that Mario Williams has to be more, should we say, prominent. I think if he starts catching passes that are a big, especially chunk play passes. I mean, he did make some good plays. There's no question about that. But I think I agree with Chris. I thought that, he should be considered for all conference at some point in his career. And it'll be interesting, to see when Singer is competing, how much Singer affects the play of Mario Williams and his mindset to compete. So it should be interesting. So with that, let's move to halftime panel. We know that USC and UCLA are leaving the Pac-12 in 2024. Word seems to be centering about replacing the Trojans and Bruins. Rumor out there, and sounds like a strong rumor, San Diego State and SMU. Your thoughts on what San Diego State and SMU could bring to the Pac-12, and would San Diego State have any effect, and SMU for that matter, USC's recruiting? Chris, you're in that area, SMU. What's the word out there?
The word is that nobody talks about SMU out here. I mean, presumably SMU opens up Texas recruiting territory, opens up the DFW television market. But the reality is nobody cares about SMU out here. When you're talking about football in Texas, you're talking about Texas A&M is a clear second, but also a major player. To a lesser extent, teams like Baylor. what do San Diego State and SMU bring as replacements to USC and UCLA? That's like saying, well, Cindy Crawford left me, but I'm replacing her with Roseanne Barr. Well, that's great, I guess, but that's not really a replacement now, is it? I mean, if that's what the Pac-12 needs, two programs that nobody nationally cares about and that nobody even in their regions care about, then the Pac-12 is in trouble. So the good news is that I'm not going to bother trying to get the Pac-12 network, and so I won't actually have to watch any of those games. But who cares about those two programs?
Well, that sets up Marc Kulkin beautifully. So, Marc, would you pontificate on this from your opinion?
Chris answered the question properly. They came there for the TV market. Nobody cares about SMU, but if you can open up the TV market and the recruit size, that's I don't know, it's a win, I guess, for Kliavkoff and the Pac-10. Otherwise, you're just getting another group of Methodists, another school that literally was given the death penalty before USC was technically given the death penalty. So you trade out one, you get one in. San Diego State, you're getting what, 1.5 million, 1.5 million viewers from San Diego County, 2 million. And you're getting the Aztecs. They gotta look, they're gonna bring a great basketball program. Football, you know, they are who they are. They're known for Marshall Falk.
There you go. Erik?
Who was there 30 years ago?
Correct.
Erik, your thoughts? What's this all mean, San Diego State and SMU to the Pac-12 if that happens?
Yeah, if it's them, I mean, it's much bigger for those two schools than it is for the Pac-12. I mean, the idea of the TV market thing, I mean, I guess when you're crunching numbers, it probably means something. Nobody in San Diego is sitting there going, "Oh, I only watch San Diego State football games." They're already watching the Pac-12 games, right? They already have Pac-12 network if they're gonna have it. They're already watching those. They're already UCLA or USC fans. I just don't think you're gonna get all of a sudden. It's like, oh, every number in San Diego now gets added on to Pac-12 viewership. I don't know if San Diego State will spend the kind of money that you need to play football at that level. I think SMU will. I think they'll spend, and I think they'll try to put a good team together now that it's like, hey, dust off the playbook that you guys used to have. We can do that now. So I think it's good for both of those programs. But I think this whole thing, just when you compare how the Pac-12 has reacted and how the Big 12 has reacted, like both those conferences were getting buried. And the Big 12 just stood up and was like, no, we're fine. It didn't really matter who they brought in. They went out and got 4 programs that didn't really do a lot, didn't really move the needle. But the Big 12 acted like it did, and they were able to really position themselves from a sort of a position of strength. Like they've been able to continue moving. They were able to, you know, they're able to do their media rights. They're able to still say, no, we're a big conference. And the Pac-12 kind of continues to just sort of tiptoe along, happy to be here and you know, shake people's hands when they get places, which again is why they're in this position in the first place. So for me, that's kind of what this shows again, is that Pac-12 new leadership trying to do things a different way ends up with kind of the same result, because I don't think anybody still there, like when George Kliavkoff shows up, I don't think there was anybody there that actually gave him any idea about how this was going to be done. Like it's not a bunch of friendship things. And so when he comes out and he says, oh, we're still shopping, you know, for expansion in the Big 12, like he kind of said that as like a cheeky, funny little thing, and everybody else took offense. And then the Big 12 just rose up and kind of destroyed them. And so it just is like anything the Pac-12 does at this point is just kind of burying themselves more and more, and certainly going farther and farther behind. Now there's all this stuff about how, you know, they don't have the media partners that maybe they thought were there, and the money that they're looking at now isn't anywhere close to what they thought it would be. And it's just kind of this fantasy land that they're living in where, oh, we'll get San Diego and we'll get Dallas and the numbers will be great. But I really have a hard time seeing that happening. And San Diego State and SMU should absolutely do whatever they can to benefit themselves, and joining the Pac-12, I think, would be certainly a step forward for them.
I think the whole thing is tragic. I think that it's a shame, just on a regional basis, that SC and UCLA are leaving the West Coast per se. College football is evolving, we know that. But it's just like, Larry Scott, what you left this conference in a position that it's just absolutely like euthanasia. I mean, it's just, watching it is pathetic. Even when you watch to follow the media rights or lack of them, and you say, okay, we're going to bring in San Diego State. Okay. That's certainly not SC or UCLA excitability. Probably is for San Diego State fans. SMU, the last time SMU really left a message was the Pony Express with Eric Dickerson and Craig James, and probably Eric Dickerson. You know, SMU is, as you guys have said, it's just a television market. And the question is, how many people are going to watch it anyway? I think the biggest problem is going to be down the line is what some of the other Pac-12 schools do when this all settles. And in comes SMU, in comes San Diego State, and Oregon says, oh, wait a minute. Or Washington says, wait a minute. Or Stanford says, wait a minute. And the Big Ten opens up its arms and says, do you want to join? I'll tell you what, this is going to be a Kliavkoff's nightmare. You can just see it a mile away. He's probably got to know it. It's just it's a sad situation, but I don't think it's going to make any difference. And you know, the fact that Oklahoma and Texas finally have bought out the idea, money wise, to get into the SEC in 2024 just detracts more from what's happening. So really kind of a sad state of affairs in my opinion, but they brought it on themselves. All right, let's get to the second half. Panel, we kick off the second half with this. Panel, the early freshman enrollees that will participate in spring ball. Who is the most intriguing to you and why? Erik McKinney?
Well, I'm certainly going to let Chris talk about Zachariah Branch again. I think we could get to 90% of the show. That's Chris talking about Zachariah. So for me, most intriguing, like I think that Makai Lemon is going to be really good. Malachi Nelson is going to be really good. Zachariah Branch is going to be really, like, I think those guys who are going to be really good are not all that intriguing to me. The guy that I'm interested in watching is Sam Green, the defensive lineman. And I'd answer this about all three defensive linemen if they were all coming in early. I really want to see what the USC coaches saw in them. Not that I'm sort of second guessing should they have gone after them, but these are three guys that you'd consider undersized, certainly in terms of when you're talking about the guys who do the rankings and where they landed in those national rankings and positional rankings. But watching them on film, boy, all three of those guys jump out. And I think they all three have just tremendous motors, and they're going to push to make impacts. I don't know if it's as true freshmen. I would certainly doubt that it's as true freshmen, but Sam Green has some athletic ability. He can absolutely move. And I really want to see him and what he is able to do, what he looks like against, we talked about the big veteran offensive linemen who are coming in. He's going to get a chance to kind of throw his body around against some of those guys. And so for me, that's the intrigue. What did USC get with those defensive linemen and Sam Green as an early guy, especially?
Well, thank you, Erik, for stealing my choice, but I'll put it in a different way when we get to me. Mark, who is it?
Tackett Curtis. I want to see what USC's only high school linebacker recruit looks like in person. I mean, to put all your eggs in a basket in one guy and not really have a plan B if you get turned down, you better be pretty good. And to be considered Mr. Football in the state of Louisiana tells me he's probably pretty good. I've seen some footage of him already in USC's weight room. He's starting to get that Brian Cushing look to him, and that's intriguing.
Chris?
Well, I'm not going to talk about Zachariah Branch because.
Would you write that down, Erik? He's not.
He just did. He just talked about him.
I just mentioned him. No, I was look. Tackett Curtis and Sam Green were actually my two, and so I'm not going to belabor it other than to say this. I think Tackett Curtis, if he stays healthy, is going to be an extraordinary player. I think even as a guy who was a 4-star and a top 100 recruit, I think he was badly underrated. You watch the athleticism with this guy, and he's a big guy. People like to compare him to Matt Grudegood, I suppose, because he's a white linebacker and because he plays on both sides of the ball. But the reality is that he is a whole lot bigger than Grudegood ever was, and probably faster. Maybe not on that, but probably. He's an extraordinary athlete, a punt returner, a quarterback, a great runner offensively. This kid can really play and seems to have a great mentality. I think he's going to be a superstar, and I would be surprised if he's not a heavy part of the rotation by midseason. I just think he's that good, and I'm really excited to see what he can do. So that's going to be my guy.
Well, as I said before, when it was all said and done, the most intriguing to me is Sam Green. And the first thing I thought about Sam Green is I thought of Aaron McDonald when I watched him. He's rather short, if you want to go negatives, but tremendous hand quickness, motor runs on every play. And it's certainly a position of need, especially in the future. And I think when I think of Big Ten, because a lot of these transfers may not be with SC after the season going into the Big Ten. But I thought that he, as a freshman, could have a major impact if he can get in the rotation at all. They might redshirt him, but he's a very, very intriguing prospect to me. Now, panel of the early transfer enrollees that will participate in spring ball, who is the most intriguing to you and why? Eric?
I'm taking three. It's all three defensive linemen. It's Keon Bars comes over in the middle from Arizona. You talked about Jack Sullivan from Purdue and Anthony Lucas from A&M. Anthony Lucas is interesting to me only because USC, the last two off seasons, and when you talk about transfer portal additions for USC, the last two off seasons, you're talking about half a roster, right? I mean, just tons of guys, and very, very few of them have been sort of potential, like very young guys that are all just sort of recruiting potential. So many of these guys that come over, it's clear the coaches want, have you done this before? Is there proven production here? And those are guys that they've really gone after. Anthony Lucas played in a handful of games. I think he had 10 tackles for A&M, but boy, if he plays like the recruit that everybody thought he was, that is a huge addition to the defensive line. And he's not a true freshman anymore, right? He's got some playing time under his belt. You can expect things, I think, out of him. Keon Bars in the middle is a guy who has some sacks, is able to get penetration. He adds to a spot that has needed kind of talented bodies added to it for years now for USC. And then Jack Sullivan, everything you hear about Jack Sullivan is this guy plays against the run surprisingly well. I mean, extremely well. And that's something that USC absolutely needs. They need a guy who can hold the edge, who can make tackles, who can be disruptive there. And so you add three guys that bring a little bit of everything. And I think, Greg, you mentioned it, and I've talked about this too. If USC doesn't add any other defensive linemen when that window opens in May and more guys jump in, which at this point, I bet there's another guy out there somewhere that ends up on USC's roster. But it wouldn't shock me at all if those are your three starters across the defensive line when the season started again. But that's why they're intriguing. Do they come in the spring and say, yeah, these are our spots and fit in and play to that level?
All right. Mark?
Yeah, I've mentioned Corey Foreman's name. Eric, you've mentioned Romello Haight's name. I'm going to mention Jamil Muhammad's name. That position all of a sudden has gotten a little crowded. And obviously, we know that if that position isn't working, the defense kind of breaks down. They're not getting any pressure on the quarterback. I'm interested to see if this guy is, as we know, he's athletic. We know he's smart. He started off playing quarterback, moved to defense. Is he the missing link in this defense?
Okay, Chris?
Yeah, those are all good choices. I'm going to go with Mason Cobb. This is a guy who was really productive at Oklahoma State. Aggressive guy, looks like a pretty athletic guy. USC badly needs somebody at a physical presence at that linebacker spot who can make plays. And the two transfers last year, Shane Lee, Eric Gentry, were a significant step up from what USC had the year before. But both of them have some limitations. Gentry, because he needs to add good weight, and hopefully he will. Shane Lee, because he's a great leader and a tough guy who probably would have been the best player on the team in 1955, but may not have the sort of athleticism that you look for in with these wide open offenses. And so Mason Cobb is a guy who has to be good from day one. He has to be if USC is going to have a chance to get to the college football playoff. And so he's the one I'm most looking forward to watching.
All right, I'll finish this segment with I'm going with Anthony Lucas. Now, I think that he has potential, which, as I said before, is unproven talent. He apparently doesn't bring it on every play, although I understand that he originally wanted to come to USC, and whatever reason he didn't. But now he's here. He could be a tremendous addition if he brings it on every play. He certainly got all the qualities to do so. But as we well know, there's a lot of players that come to universities with a lot of hoopla, and potential remains potential. Unproven talent till you find out they like the game. They don't love the game. I think Coach Nua will bring it out in this guy one way or the other. It'll be sink or swim. And if he does produce, it's going to be a really big bonus for USC. Now, staying on defense, panel, name the one player that needs to up his game during spring ball. Eric, who needs to bring their game in spring ball?
Shane Lee, for all the reasons that everybody talked about Mason Cobb. I think there are, and we knew that coming over, that he was going to be a 10 plus in terms of off the field, in terms of weight room, in terms of what Lincoln Riley needed to set culture. And he was, from the minute he stepped on campus, he was a leader. He ended up being a team captain. He was a guy that everybody looked to constantly. There's athletic limitations to how fast he is. He's, certainly the hand, thumb, wrist injury that he dealt with in the middle part of the season did not help things. But USC needs another step up there, I think, at linebacker, and it'll be interesting to see how he develops, because like we talked about with Cortland Ford on the offensive side, just from his point of view, how many snaps are there if Mason Cobb shows up and plays the way that people think he can play, and Gentry stays there, and if Rajon Davis takes a big step forward this offseason, and if Tackett Curtis is the guy everybody thinks he is. I know nothing ever works out like that when you talk about what the roster looks like to where we get to the season and who's actually contributing. But that's a spot where when you talk about the guys coming in and the additions, it doesn't feel at this point like an absolute lock. Yeah, Shane Lee's a starter and going to play, starters reps throughout the entire season right now. So again, spring will be interesting to see what he does on the field, because the leadership and the intelligence and all of that stuff just kind of unquestioned, and he's absolutely a guy you want on your team and in your program.
So who is it, Mark?
I don't think it's fair you're asking me to just name one player. It's the defense. But if you're going to make me pick a player, and I don't think anybody's mentioned this name, Max Williams, nickelback. That's a position that, Max started off the season really strong, but he seemed to kind of, I don't want to say he faded out, but he kind of, it almost like he got lost in the wash. Whether it was he's being matched up against tight ends who are 3 times bigger than him, I don't know.
NFL potential first-round pick tight ends.
Right. So I don't know if that left a negative impression in my mind. It shouldn't, but he's undersized. I think we can all agree on that, but he plays the position really well. I just don't know if that's the right spot for him. If they're going to say, all right, man, 1-on-1, see that tight end, go cover him. He's going to have to really step up his game if that's going to be his role.
All right, Chris, who's number one for you?
I hate to bring up this name, and I hate to bring up this name because he gets talked about so much.
Zachariah Branch does not play defense. I'm going to cut you here.
Well, I want him to. No, look, the answer, of course, is Corey Foreman. The question is whether Corey Foreman is going to be a productive college player or not. He's not going to be an All-American. We know that already. I mean, let's be honest. He has not jumped off the screen yet. I can't even think of a play where he's sort of jumped off the screen as, wow, that was pretty athletic.
Wait a minute. Wait. What about that interception against UCLA?
It was a nice catch. I'm not sure that was an athletic play. It was a nice catch, and he'll have that play forever. The question is whether Corey Foreman is going to be a guy who can start and be productive and be a good player. I don't know the answer to that. I think I know the answer to that, and I don't think anybody's going to like the answer. But this is his chance this spring, because if he can't do it this spring, he's probably going to need to enter the transfer portal because USC is going to leave him behind. And that's a really strange thing for a guy who came out of high school with the hype that he had. But if he doesn't step it up now, when is it going to happen? This is his chance. I hope he does it. I'd love for him to prove me wrong, because I've said a lot of negative things about Corey over the last couple of years because I haven't seen him actually make plays. So I hope he does it. But if he's going to do it, he better do it now, because I guarantee Lincoln Riley is not going to wait around for him to make plays. Lincoln Riley needs to win football games right now.
Yeah, and I will say this, I don't think your comments were negative towards him. I think they were realistic. It's just what you see is what you're getting. And I think you told it like it is. That's kind of what we want here on Inside the Trojans Huddle. And that transitions me to, I'm going to say one from maybe out of left field. I don't know. It just strikes me that I'd like to see Sierra Wright up his game at corner. To me, the corner positions are really going to be a question mark. Of course, they'll do maybe as well as the pass rush and stopping the run game. But I thought Sierra is in a position now where he too has to really show what he can do. And I think he's got a lot more to give. Depends on how much he's able to give. But he's a guy that I think really does need to up his game, in my opinion. All right, let's get to overtime questions and answers panel. Let's take a look here at question 1 from our viewers, and you can all jump into this. This is kind of a long one, but this is from Robbie from Long Beach East Side. Hey, Greg, I want you to know that I've enjoyed reading your work since the old Scout Board, and I truly appreciate the time and effort you put into the IMHO and ONSO, and quite frankly, only pay for the service to read them. Do not care about recruiting. I was on the team with Jermaine Alice Gray, and know firsthand how wrong those rankings can be. My question is this: after watching every defensive snap at least 5 times and being able to watch all 22 cam in the Cotton Bowl, like real game tape, I think the problem is much bigger than Grinch or the 3-3-5 or 4-3 or 3-4 or whatever. 9 times out of 10, the defender was in a position to make the tackle or the play. Specifically, as we were talking about this team, and the Jimmies and Joes, as they call it, froze and failed to make the play. This is not on Grinch. The problem is how defense, and specifically defensive players, are seen as not as important. Don't you know, people just want to see offense? Okay, I think the question kind of asks, is the defense being forgotten because so much attention is being paid to the offense? Jump in.
Well, I'll jump in first and say, Robbie, if that's true, that the only reason you're paying is to read Greg's articles, then there's some real credibility issues with you right now. I mean,
I mean, just Arledge,
Yeah,
I would miss
no.
you fell right in. You were like the State of the Union. You fell right into that trap.
I was curious if you were
Greg, your
actually going
brother
to read
wrote
that
this
part
for
of the
you.
question. But, and you did, and I just don't know what to make of that. Look, Lincoln Riley knows that defense is important. Whether or not Lincoln Riley's program is able to build a great defensive football team or not, I don't know. I don't think anybody knows. But I think Lincoln Riley does understand that when his offense is scoring 40-something points and they're still losing football games, that's not great for his team. To say that this is not on Grinch, I guess we'll wait and see on that. There's no question that there were players in a position to make plays that didn't make them. But if your response always is, well, the players have to make plays, well, then I'm asking, well, why are you paying defensive coordinators $1.5 million a year then? I mean, I do the job for less than that. I don't know what I'm doing, but since it doesn't matter what the defensive coordinator does, I guess they should hire me. Look, USC the last 2 years has turned in probably the 2 worst defensive performances you'll ever see from a major blue blood college football program, and they have to get dramatically better. Lincoln Riley knows that. We all know that. So I guess we'll see.
I think this has been kind of like a small crime scene that's developing into a major crime scene as they get more information and evidence. And I say that, excuse me, because there was that underlying feeling with Lincoln Riley coming to SC that he was great on offense, but not so, should we say, focused on defense. And then he came here, and everyone talked about was all the explosive offense. And I think all of us would agree. We kept saying, you got to play defense too. And what happens when they find somebody who can score over 40 points and beat them like 45-42? And now that we've seen that happen, it is of concern. And I tend to agree that there's a lot of pressure on Lincoln Riley. People say there was a lot of pressure on Alex Grinch. There is, but let's face it, Alex Grinch didn't hire himself to be defensive coordinator. Alex Grinch didn't retain himself to be defensive coordinator in 2023. So there's a lot of pressure on Lincoln Riley and some of the comments that he made, which maybe aren't inappropriate. He's backing his man. Okay. They're paying him a lot of money, but boy, I'll tell you, if this defense doesn't show marked improvement, and I can guarantee every media person out there and everybody who does stats is going to be comparing last year with what happens this year. It could be a really tough grind. So if Lincoln Riley wants to snap that perception, because I do think, in my opinion, it is hurting recruiting, that recruits get the impression that all they do is play offense. They don't think much of defense. Like Don Coryell, who just got voted into the NFL Hall of Fame, Steve Bishop, a good friend and contributor to WeAreSC.com, told me that's all Coryell thought about was offense. He could care less about defense. And I agree with Chris. I'm sure that Lincoln Riley knows it's not a good perception. So they got to change that perception. All right. Question 2 from Trojan Mike in Dallas. Hey, Greg, I think you and I are about the same age. I'm sorry to hear that. So do you remember where you were in November 1964 when Rod Sherman caught the game-winning touchdown from Craig Furtick versus Notre Dame? I was shopping with my parents at Food Giant. Wow, there's a name from the past. In Van Nuys, my dad had his transistor radio on with Tom Kelly calling the action. Well, yes, I remember that I was at Michael Hirschbein's house, one of the few SC games I had not gone to since 1962, home games, and it was incredible. In fact, I'm going to just tell you something, Trojan Mike in Dallas. You have spurned me on for my Sunday's IMHO column about great plays that we remember in the past, like 23 blasts, or in this case, I believe it was 84 Z delay. But yeah, that was very exciting to listen on radio. In those days, you listen to the radio on the games. So do you guys have you guys don't have a memory of Rod Sherman catching the ball, do you?
I mean,
It's a black and white
I've seen the
picture.
video.
It's a black and white picture from the LA Times.
Yeah.
Is this supposed to be the Greg Katz answer question session?
Well, wait a minute. Wait a minute. I hardly call attention to myself. I don't
The
make.
first two were soliloquies.
Oh, here we go, Mark. Get out the violin and let's start playing a sad song.
Are we
Jeez,
ready to go?
Mark. You got your own show now, Mark, and you're starting to get out of line.
Jeez.
Question 3 from Big Lot. That's LOTT. I'm really curious about what the 22 freshman class thoughts were on how this last season played out. Was it what it was perceived before they enrolled or committed? Of those freshmen, which one will have the biggest impact this upcoming season? Mark, we'll let you start off on this one.
I'm gonna have to go with Rayleigh Brown. I mean, he came in, and I think he came in the freshman class as, okay, he's going to be that impact player. So let's see if he's ready to do it in 2023.
I also am curious what their thoughts were. They were never available to media as true freshmen through the season. I'm gonna say Damani in terms of the biggest impact this year. The question in the middle, I mean, obviously I have to guess for them. Was it what was perceived before they enrolled or committed? The last they'd seen USC on the field, they went 4-8. They just won in their freshman year. They won 11 games. They played in the Pac-12 championship and they played in the Cotton Bowl. I can't imagine any of those guys really thought, yeah, we're going to win the national championship my true freshman year after I just gone into a 4-8 season. They all, again, hearing what they said when they committed and what the thought was kind of for that whole class, they wanted to be the ones that built it up and kind of brought USC back. USC finished as a top 15 team, had a chance to go higher than that if a couple things go differently in those last few games. I can't imagine that anyone on that team, talking big picture now, removed from that Cotton Bowl game, I'm sure there's a ton of disappointment right at the end of the season. But they know what they built and where you can go from here and what things look like, I think, going forward. I think there's a lot of positivity about what happens next for USC.
Chris, were you happy with this freshman class, the way they performed?
Yeah, well, sure. I think it's best not to expect very much from a true freshman class, because there are positions where guys can step in and play well, and every once in a while there's a Winston Justice who can do it as or the tackle with the Cowboys, Tyrone Smith, who can step in as true freshman and play those positions. But it's unusual. So I think that was a very small class, but there's some talent there, and I agree with Eric. I doubt if any of them were bothered by what happened last year. The reality is USC went from completely and utterly irrelevant and embarrassing to a real player on the national stage. That's a pretty good turnaround in 1 year.
All right, question 4. I'm not sure I understood the question, but I'm going to put it in anyway because this is from Romy in Huntington Beach, California. Kind of a regular viewer question. Who and where are the contacts of TTC? I must be out of it. What is TTC?
It's supposed to be the Tommy Group.
Okay, explain that to our viewers,
I'm
listeners.
not asking. I was more of a rhetorical.
So it's a question about kind of USC's NIL collective, that sort of stuff. And we've heard that potentially near future weeks, months, something that USC will have more of a statement about kind of what the direction that's going and where things are going there. But at this point, that's kind of a wait and see. And again, USC will kind of push that and have a statement.
I think the C was a typo for a G. That's all I have to assume.
Okay. Yeah, I just didn't understand what that meant, but Eric, you clarified it for me. Appreciate it. All right. Well, we're coming to the final question, which is a hot topic buzzer beater question. This is from Mason in Norco, California. Why does Lincoln Riley close spring practices? You may begin your opinions.
Because he can, because he's the
Well,
boss.
thank you. That was very insightful. Thank you.
Is there a different answer?
So
He
nobody
closes
can
them.
see-
He closes them to limit distractions for everyone involved, players, coaches, all of that. He was very clear. He didn't tie it to I close practices because of this. But one of his drives is that when it's football, and he doesn't want kind of distraction and all of that sort of stuff. And he's very big, like most coaches are, on limiting absolutely anything that could be a competitive disadvantage for him. That's the injury thing. That's, there was the big story at Oklahoma where the student paper kind of spied in on a practice and announced who was taking first team reps, and anything like that sort of shows his hand of, this guy's doing this, or this looks like this. He just wants that cut, full stop. And the other side is, right, everyone's going to bring up Pete Carroll, and he opened things up and everything was out there. He also had some things that he definitely wanted, not to get out, and that sort of stuff. Coaches get paid a lot of money and they get to coach the way they can coach. As long as they're winning, they can do what they want. And that's the way he sees his program running. And that's the way he's done it. I'm curious kind of what exactly it looks like this spring in terms of open or closed or things like that. But brought a lot of people out to the spring game last year, and I assume it will again this year when fans do get a chance to get out there.
Pete Carroll was an anomaly. Very few coaches do that, and there's no reason he needs to. Look, you can say, well, Lincoln Riley, what's the big deal if people come and watch practices? And I suspect his response would be, well, probably there's not going to be a big deal, and probably nothing's going to be disclosed that will give us that will put us at a competitive disadvantage, probably, but it could happen. And what's my upside to letting people out there? I don't need to let people come out and watch practice in order to build interest in my program. All I need to do is win football games. And if I win football games, I'll be fine. I don't know for sure because I haven't looked into it, but I would be willing to bet that Alabama does not have open practices, and that Nick Saban, who is a serious control freak, probably wants to know exactly who's around and why they're around and what they're doing. He probably requires a DNA test from people before they get anywhere near the practice field. And it doesn't seem, because that's the way most football coaches are. If you win, you're going to be fine. If you lose, you're not going to be fine. There's no substantial upside to him to opening this thing up. So why should he? Besides, if he doesn't allow us around, then we can't see what the defense is up to. And that's probably good. It puts off the criticism for a few months.
Well, I really don't like his policy, and he can do whatever he wants. He's getting paid millions and millions of more dollars than I'm getting. But spring practice, really? You want to close it to the public? Okay, you can justify that by saying the spring game is going to draw 25,000 people. Yeah, and I thought that they did a great job, and I'm including Riley in this, in actually having close to what we think a spring game should look like. And kudos to them and to the coaching staff and the players. It was great. However, during the week, I could see where he would say, it's distractions when people are watching. Well, you know what? How many people from the media come and watch practice in general, especially in the spring? Maybe my recollection would be, if you don't have the hangers on, or so to speak, but from the websites and the Times and the Register and the City Group, what do you have? Maybe 15 people, 20 people at the most. And you know what? The media is free publicity. Now, let's take the argument that, if he's winning, that's all that counts. He justifies it by winning. Okay, but you're USC. Winning is not the only game. Winning conferences and national championships, especially conferences, are the utmost importance. And people want to know about what's going on with SC. I will guarantee you this. If, and I hope it doesn't happen, if SC does not win the Pac-12 next year with with Caleb Williams at quarterback, and some of the same problems on defense and yada, yada, yada come up again, that honeymoon is definitely going to be over for Lincoln Riley. The excitement will be going into the Big 12, or excuse me, the Big 10. That will be exciting, but it will be a bigger challenge. And you know what? It's a fickle world of USC football. You know, if you're winning and you're winning conference titles and occasionally make a run at a national championship, people are pretty much satisfied. But winning 9-10 games and not winning the championship, now maybe that'll change with the expanded playoffs in 2024. But I can tell you that not having the media watch spring practice, especially for just like a discussion we had in today's huddle, people want to know, and we're not an inconvenience in any shape or form. And if you watch where some of these teams practice position-wise, they are so far away from us, you couldn't tell the offensive lineman without a Palomar telescope. But the point is, in respect to Lincoln Riley, it's his program. He should run it the way he wants, and that's the way he'll do it. So, again, if you have a reminder, a question, or comments for our panel, go to either the WeAreSC message boards and click on the thread that pertains to Inside the Trojans Huddle viewer or listener questions. And that will do it for this Tuesday's edition of Inside the Trojans Huddle. Reminder until next Tuesday, a big thank you again to some great panelists. Guys, tell it like it is. Marc Kulkin, Chris Arledge, and Erik McKinney. And a special thank you to all of you for watching and listening to Inside the Trojans Huddle. Again, you can listen to it on podcasts now. Have yourself a great week. This is your moderator, Greg Katz, saying, fight on, everybody.